Hello, welcome to the Society for American Music's digital lecture series. My name is Hannah Leland. In this lecture, I'll be presenting a snapshot of 1940s Hollywood through the lens of Ben Hecht's 1946 film, Specter of the Rose. The convergence of Hecht's film, the composer George Antheil, and a young American violinist, Werner Gebauer, has all of the makings of a Hollywood romantic drama. There will be mystery and intrigue, a love story, and a truly remarkable Golden Age film score. So grab some popcorn and settle in. Let's start with a little background on our main character, George Antheil, to set the stage for 1946. In 1922, the American composer, then only 21 years old, embarked on his first European tour. While he began his tour as a concert pianist, he quickly turned to composition instead. With the encouragement of Igor Stravinsky, he settled in Paris in a small apartment above Sylvia Beach's famous bookstore, Shakespeare and Company. It was there that he met the likes of Ernest Hemingway, Pablo Picasso, James Joyce, and the poet Ezra Pound. With the encouragement of his new avant-garde friends, Antheil attempted to push the boundaries of the music world with wild, aggressive pieces, making a name for himself as the bad boy of music. Antheil composed 3 violin sonatas for the American violinist Olga Rudge in this style. Antheil all but rid his music of melody in favor of driving rhythms and clustered harmonies during this period. Both instruments are practically abused, and the music sounds more like a punk rock guitar riff than it does a violin and piano sonata. At the end of the 1920s, Rudge resigned from concert activity, and Antheil found few incentives to continue to write for the violin. He left a roughly sketched violin concerto in an early phase of composition and would not compose for the solo violin again for nearly 20 years. At the same time, Antheil faced a barrage of negative reviews from his notorious 1927 Carnegie Hall debut, causing him to turn towards a much more conservative, even neo-romantic style of composition. Believing himself a failure in the world of serious concert music, Antheil returned to the US in 1933, settling in Hollywood with his wife Bosky, and pursued a number of interesting non-musical endeavors. During this compositional impasse, he wrote a text on endocrinology titled "Every Man His Own Detective," provided advice to the lovelorn in the Chicago Sun-Syndicate, and wrote a regular column for Esquire magazine. In 1940, Antheil met the Hollywood starlet Hedy Lamarr at a small dinner party hosted by the actress Janet Gaynor. The two became close friends and went on to invent a secret communication system together, which received a US patent in 1942. Their spread spectrum technology became the basis for much future technology and is still used to this day in Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and GPS. In order to make ends meet during this time, and perhaps to satisfy some internal musical necessity, Antheil composed film scores. His work in Hollywood ranks with some of the greatest film composers of the period, scoring over 30 films between 1935 and 1957, only 2 years before his death in 1959. He worked with Cecil B. DeMille on The Plainsman and The Buccaneer, and scored music for Humphrey Bogart. Antheil admitted in a 1953 Time article that he was, quote, quietly fostering a reputation as a musical medicine man who could pull together a loosely knit film by music alone. He joked, "If I say so myself, I've saved a couple of sure flops," though I very much doubt that he was joking at all. Antheil had a particularly collaborative relationship with the American screenwriter, director, and playwright Ben Hecht. Together, they worked on several films, including The Scoundrel from 1931, Angels Over Broadway featuring Douglas Fairbanks Jr. and Rita Hayworth, and most importantly, for our conversation, Hecht's 1946 film noir ballet drama, Specter of the Rose. With Specter of the Rose, Antheil's Hollywood life and his concert music life, which he had just begun to explore again toward the end of the war, came together in the most serendipitous of ways. In 1945, during the intermission of a rehearsal for Stravinsky's Dunbarton Oaks, Antheil met a young violinist, Werner Gebauer, then concertmaster of the National Symphony in Washington, D.C. Gebauer, born in 1918, was a child prodigy, both as a violinist and as a composer. He studied with Carl Flesch, Jacques Thibault, and later Albert Spalding at the Juilliard School in New York. Having left Germany in 1938, Gebauer quickly made a name for himself in the US, appearing as a soloist and serving as concertmaster of several orchestras across the country. Gebauer had heard Antheil's music in concert and admired his compositions. He wrote to him in May of 1945 with the following request. I recall with pleasure the rehearsals and performances of your Fourth Symphony in Washington. And on the strength of my admiration for your music, I want to address the following request to you. I am planning a Carnegie Hall recital around December and would very much want to add prominently to my program a first performance of a work of yours, a Concertstück or sonatina, brilliant if you like, and perhaps sentimental. Antheil acquiesced and produced a 3-movement sonatina for Gebauer. The young violinist was so pleased with the work that he commissioned further a violin concerto. Antheil picked up the 20-year-old sketches of Rudge's violin concerto, and the two musicians worked closely together to complete the piece. Gebauer wrote to Antheil in May of 1946, saying, should you encounter any violin technical problems or effects which might be on your mind and would or could be realized in a discussion thereof, do not hesitate to contact me at any time, the more the merrier. In early July 1946, as the two men continued work on the concerto, Gebauer stayed at the Antheil household in Laurel Canyon. The composer took the violinist with him to see the premiere of his latest musical score, Hecht's Specter of the Rose. The film centers around a ballet company in which the principal male dancer, Andrei Sanin, played by Ivan Kirov, has gone mad. While he appears under control, he occasionally hallucinates, hearing music from the ballet Specter of the Rose, the ballet in which his wife collapsed on stage and died. He is suspected of the murder, and yet one of the young ballerinas of the company, Heidi, played by the young Viola Essen, falls in love with him, sure that she can cure him. However, the hallucinations begin to take over and Sanin descends into insanity. A Variety magazine review described the film as follows. In 1946, low-rent Republic Studios lured Oscar-winning writer Ben Hecht with the offer of being able to produce and direct films. But while the studio gave Hecht creative liberty, it imprisoned him within its ridiculously low-budget framework. For his first, and it turned out only, Republic offering, Hecht had $200,000 to spend. The resulting work, Specter of the Rose, turned out to be one of the most bewildering features of Hollywood's golden age. Part thriller, part light comedy, and part ballet, the production was an emotionally bipolar experience. Antheil's son Peter remembered the film in an interview with Mauro Piccinini from 2008, saying, "It was perhaps the worst movie ever made. At the end of the film, Viola was beginning to break up with laughter at her lines, but the film company was too cheap to reshoot the sequence, so it remained in the film." As usual, George gave the movie a good score. The film's score sits firmly in Antheil's luscious, neo-romantic Hollywoodian style. The melodies soar, underpinned with thick, rich harmonies. Antheil's score does, in many ways, save this potential flop. I'd like to focus in on 3 key musical moments in the film. Specter of the Rose opens in Madame La Sylph's dance studio, where Heidi, the ingenue, is rehearsing with the rest of the company. The rehearsal pianist plays a subtle and restrained waltz in the background while the dancers train. The film is bookended by practically the same shot. Dancers warming up as the rehearsal pianist plays his unpretentious waltz, neatly wrapping up this complex 90-minute film. The focal point of both the film and Antheil's score occurs about 2/3 of the way through the film. Here, Hecht utilizes the dramatic convention of a play within a play for the fully staged ballet performance of Specter of the Rose. The original ballet, first performed in 1911 in Monte Carlo, was choreographed by Michael Fokine and set to Hector Berlioz's 1841 orchestral arrangement of Carl Maria von Weber's Invitation to the Dance. In the ballet, a young girl, originally danced by Tamara Karsavina, dances with a souvenir rose from her first ball. Upon falling asleep, the rose comes alive and dances with the girl. Vaslav Nijinsky, the celebrated Russian dancer, originated the part of the Spirit of the Rose. After a pas de deux, the young girl returns to her bed and falls asleep. The rose exits by leaping through the window into the night. Spoiler alert, this just might foreshadow the epic climax of Hecht's film. Hecht kept the story of Fokine's ballet, but set it to Antheil's new music rather than Weber's. Antheil scores the ballet sequence with two contrasting waltz melodies. The first waltz is rhythmically unsettled, characterized by a light instrumentation with strings, harp, celesta, and flutes. The rhythmic structure underpins a sweet, delicate, repeated melody as Heidi falls asleep on her couch. For the Rose's Dance and the Pas de Deux, Antheil composed a waltz with a lush, sweeping melody utilizing the full orchestra. This contrasts Heidi's solo waltz in both instrumentation and in the character of the music. Where Heidi's waltz is delicate, the Rose's waltz is broad and proud. Antheil later excerpted this 4-minute ballet sequence as a standalone concert piece titled The Specter of the Rose, Ballet Waltz. Whatever Gebauer thought of the film itself, he was absolutely smitten with its leading lady, Viola Essen. He later wrote in his unpublished autobiography that only 2 days after meeting her on that July 6th evening, he left George's Mediterranean villa for Viola's Beverly Hills bungalow and the start of a torrid affair. The two married later that year, and Antheil sent his well wishes to Gebauer, writing, "Congratulations from my heart on your marriage to Viola. I know that you could not have married anybody nicer, more beautiful, nor with a more wonderful heart. You are a lucky dog. I hope you know it. I'm sure you do." How romantic. Gebauer passed away in 2013 at the age of 95. While organizing his late father's papers in his attic in November of 2016, Mark Gebauer came across a score for violin and piano in his father's own hand titled Valses from Specter of the Rose. The piece had been dedicated to Viola and dated May 1947, Beverly Hills, California. The little waltzes were intended as a gift from Werner to Viola, recently married and expecting their first child. Gebauer based each of the 3 short waltzes on music from the film, displaying both his virtuosity as a violinist and skill as a composer. The first waltz takes its melody from the bookend opening and ending sequences in Madame Lasself's studio. The movement begins with the same reticent piano melody, which Gebauer fleshes out with a moody, lyrical violin line. Gebauer pulled material for his second movement from the Viennese-esque waltz that accompanies Viola's solo dance during the Specter of the Rose ballet scene. The awkward rhythmic emphasis is encouraged as the performers are asked to elongate the second beat whenever the theme appears. The second waltz ends with a delicate harmonic passage in the violin. The listener can practically see Heidi falling asleep on the couch, awaiting the entrance of the rose. The final movement is raucous and exciting, challenging both the violinist and pianist with daring technical feats, not unlike the climax of the film's central ballet. The movement ends with a wild flourish, just as the rose, Sanine, leaps through the window and off stage. Unfortunately, these waltzes never received a performance during Antheil or Gebauer's lifetimes. Gebauer covered the dedication to Viola sometime after their marriage ended, after no more than a year. Essen, born in Bulgaria in 1925, continued to dance into the 1950s, though Heidi in Specter of the Rose remained her only film role. Gebauer enjoyed an illustrious concert career that took him all over the world, appearing at the Hollywood Bowl 3 times and at the White House twice for Presidents Franklin D. Roosevelt and Harry S. Truman. He held doctorates from the University of Königsberg and Columbia University. He also attempted, unsuccessfully, to teach Albert Einstein to play one of the Mozart violin concertos over a series of trips to Princeton. Antheil continued to compose concert music and Hollywood film scores, though he limited himself to only 2 films per year to avoid the label Hollywood composer. His opera Volpone premiered to mixed reviews in New York in 1953, and he largely retired from composition by the late 1950s. His legacy included 2 composition students, Henry Brandt and Benjamin Lees, and though he composed a substantial amount of music in his later, perhaps more mature and controlled style, he is still best known for his wild, devil-may-care music of the 1910s and 20s. Thank you for watching this lecture. I hope you enjoyed learning about this interesting cast of characters. To wrap it all up, I'd like to play for you the final movement of Gebauer's Valses from Specter of the Rose. Please enjoy.